there, I'm Lucille Greeff and I am one of the partners in Aephoria. The purpose of working with the Enneagram is not to find the Enneagram style that you lead from. That's really step 0 in the journey. The purpose of the Enneagram has always been development and transformation. Whether you're working with the Enneagram of personality and transforming yourself, or working with the process Enneagram to help you transform the way in which you live your life. So how do you use the Enneagram for development purposes? For this video, we're mostly going to deal with the Enneagram of personality. As I said, you start by finding your Enneagram style that you lead from. If you think about the Enneagram and the symbol of the Enneagram as a map, finding your style is a little bit like the X on a map that says, you are here now. The rest of the Enneagram is a pathway for growth and development. There are 2 important principles that we work with when working with the Enneagram for transformation. The first is called the Law of One. And the Law of One is represented by the circle that's part of the diagram of the Enneagram. It represents wholeness. And in many ways, the principle here is that all 9 styles together, the full circle, is what truly represents humanity and what it means to be a fully developed human. So what we want to do is we want to return to the full circle. We're fixated in one ego position, and the rest of the Enneagram is there to help us remember what all the neglected parts of ourselves are. So that's the Law of One, the Law of Wholeness. It's an important principle, but in some ways it's also a little bit hard to act from there because it's very hard for me to keep 9 things in mind at once. So this is where the second principle, what we call the Law of 3, comes in. If you think about your main Enneagram style as one leg of a chair, and just imagine you're sitting on a chair with only one leg. It's really hard. You don't have a stable base, you're going to have to really work your core muscles, and at some point you will definitely get too tired and you'll tip over. This is what living our lives from only one style looks like, sitting on a chair with one leg. We know that a chair with only 2 legs is still quite unstable. The Law of 3 reminds us that once we have 3 legs on a chair, we can really get grounded, and that's simple enough for us to work with as human beings. I can remember 3 things, might not be able to think of 9 things while living my life all the time, but I can definitely think of 3. So the Law of 3 is the core developmental principle. One of the first ways in which we use the Law of 3 is to live our everyday lives in greater balance. And for that, we have the helpers of my main style with my 2 next door neighbors, my wings. So if you lead from Enneagram 1, on the Enneagram, 9 and 2 are your next door neighbors, and you need both of those next door neighbors to help you lead a balanced life. What most of us do is, obviously we've got our main style well practiced, and what we then do is we start developing one of those wings because we realize that we need some adaptive mechanisms. And that's great, but then we still have a 2-legged chair. We need to develop our neglected wing so that we have 3 of these styles in conversation with each other. And that helps us to live a more balanced life. Let me give you an example. Remember I said if you're an Enneagram 1, you have 2 wings, 9 and 2. So let's imagine I'm a perfectionist. I really value self-control. I get the detail right. Maybe the downside of that is I can become a bit obsessive compulsive and get stuck in the details some of the time. Now, if I'm drawing on my Enneagram 9 wing, the 9 wing would say, okay, maybe part of your adaptation here can be to be in the detail, but to do so in a way that doesn't create conflict and fights with other people. Maybe you can be a bit nicer while speaking to people about what's right and what you expect of them, and that can be a great mechanism for balancing out that strong, ethical, detailed, have to get it right way of the Enneagram 1. If I just have that in play, that's a great start, but there's more. If we also use the wing at Enneagram 2, we might also start to focus on other people's needs and say, great, this is what you need, what do they need? And how can you work with them to have all the needs met here? So be nicer and tune into other people's needs, and then you might find yourself moving forward much more effectively. And this is our everywhere adaptation mechanism. It's called the wings. The second application of the law of 3 is a lot more radical. It's using the lines that run from your Enneagram style to really transform and make massive shifts in your life. If you work with adult development theory, maybe you've heard of this idea of stage changes. In the Enneagram, the lines are very helpful mechanisms for supporting stage changes in our lives. So once again, we're still working with our Enneagram 1, detail-oriented, very perfectionistic. Now from Enneagram 1, there's a line to Enneagram 7 and a line to Enneagram 4. Both of these have a lot to teach us. Enneagram 7 reminds the 1 that there's the need to look up and to see the future and to be visionary and to not get stuck in the detail. So if I have a very detail-oriented person who's focusing on drawing the bigger vision into projects and into my leadership style, that can make a massive difference. That's not just a small adaptation, that's a radical transformation for a leader. The point to Enneagram 4 reminds us that we need to have clear purpose in what we're doing, and that we need to lead from a place of authenticity, that our emotions and being vulnerable is okay. In fact, it may add a lot of gravitas to who I am as a leader. So 4 reminds us to know ourselves and to also bring that into how we lead and show up in the world. So that's another way of working with the law of 3. The first is the wings. The second is working with the lines of transformation. As you continue to delve into the Enneagram, you might also meet the instincts and the centers, all different ways of bringing the law of 3 into play in my work that I'm doing for myself. So, why do we do the Enneagram? It's not just an assessment that helps me get a number. We do it to grow and develop. So once I know where I start from on the map, I can grow and develop from there into the Enneagram as a whole.